Hello, my name is Jess, and welcome to Dyscalculia Research Revealed, an interview series where I speak with leading researchers in the field of dyscalculia. Together, we'll explore their most recent and prominent research findings and what these discoveries mean for educators, parents, and individuals with dyscalculia. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by the very accomplished Camilla Gilmore from Loughborough University. She'll be sharing a snappy overview of her research on dyscalculia, current projects, and any future directions. Good afternoon, Camilla. Thank you so much for joining me today. How are you doing?
Hi, Jess. It's lovely to be here.
Thank you so much for being on the series today. So I'm just going to start off by asking you to give us a bit of a brief introduction about your research and what sort of things that you look at.
Yes, hi. So I am Camilla Gilmore. I'm a professor of mathematical cognition at Loughborough University, and I lead the ESRC Centre for Early Maths Learning. So my research is based around mathematical cognition, and that means I study how children learn mathematics. So I'm very much interested from that learning perspective and trying to understand what kind of processes are involved in learning maths and what things influence how well or how easily someone can learn maths.
Brilliant. So thank you for giving that nice overview. So can you give us a bit of a background of how you got into sort of dyscalculia more specifically?
Yeah, so I started with an interest just in maths, understanding how children learn maths anyway. And I think the reason I got into this was I studied psychology at university, and during my degree, there was a lot of information about how children learn to talk and how children learn to read and some of the difficulties. And we learned all about dyslexia. But we didn't learn anything about maths learning or how children learn what numbers are and how numbers work and why children might have difficulties with that. So from that point, I've then spent the whole of my career thinking I want to, understand these processes and understand about maths learning. And so I've worked on lots of different topics in maths learning. And of course, if you're interested in maths learning, then you're interested in differences in children's outcomes, why some children and some adults love maths and think it's this beautiful way of looking at the world, and why other people have really negative reactions to it and hate learning it and find it really difficult. And so that obviously brought me naturally to think about children who have really proper maths learning difficulties, so they're actually really struggling, and those who might have dyscalculia, and trying to understand why is it that some people find maths so much more difficult to learn than others.
Brilliant. So that's like a really, I can see where you've gotten into this like field of dyscalculia. So are you able to give me a bit of a rundown of maybe any any studies that you're focusing on at the moment, or any findings that you might be able to share?
So I guess one of the things that I've been involved in lots of different projects looking at maths learning, and what they have in common is this thinking about maths as this really complex domain. So maths is not just one thing. Maths is not the things that influence how easily we find maths to learn might be different for different parts of maths. So we need to sort of understand properly what the maths is that children are learning in order to understand why some people find that more easy and others find it more difficult. And then when we're looking at that maths in that detail, so we might be thinking of counting or arithmetic or geometry or algebra, all this kind of separate parts of maths. Then we need to look at the skills that are involved. And so some of the things that I've been interested in is looking at things like executive function skills. So these are our kind of general thinking skills, and things like working memory and inhibition and how those might impact how easy or difficult we find it to learn maths. Other things I'm interested in are sort of spatial skills, because again, we know that spatial reasoning is a really important part of maths, and not just for geometry, but for all different parts of maths. And trying to unpick, which bits of maths are these different skills really important for and why that might be. So I can, an example of one kind of project has been looking at spatial reasoning, and we were looking at this in children in year 2, and we had an intervention. So we went into schools and we were getting the children to learn maths in a particular way, and we were doing this based around Lego play. So the children in their maths lessons, they got to play with some Lego in a structured way led by the teacher. And we were looking at the impact of this on their spatial skills, but also their math skills. And I think one of the most interesting things, kind of unexpected, so we expected the spatial activities, the Lego activities, to help with maths, and we did find that, which was brilliant. But one of the things that we hadn't expected was teachers reporting back to us that how wonderful it was for them to see children who wouldn't think of themselves as being good at maths being able to access this, and children who maybe often are anxious or nervous about maths actually just loving the Lego activities and finding themselves doing really well, and actually sometimes children who might be thought of as not so good at maths helping someone else who might be thought of as good at maths, because actually doing it spatially, doing it with Lego, meant that there was a different way for them to access it. And so that was a really lovely finding that we weren't necessarily expecting, and that's something that we want to go on and follow up and look at how different ways of doing maths and different, when we build on different types of skills, can maybe make maths accessible in different ways, and particularly for some people who might otherwise be thought of as having maths difficulties or dyscalculia. So that's kind of a one particular thing that we want to work on.
Amazing. So that's really cool to see that you've found a task that is accessible to everyone and that anyone can enjoy, regardless of whether people struggle with maths or not. So I'm really excited to see where that goes, and I would like to hear from a follow-up. So can you just give us maybe a bit of an overview of how your research makes a difference for individuals with dyscalculia, or educators, parents, or policy?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's the same idea that I was talking about before, that thinking about maths as a very complex domain, and so that we need to understand that complexity in order to understand why children struggle, but also that it might be that children struggle for different reasons. So even within children with dyscalculia, it's not the case that everyone's going to have exactly the same set of underlying cognitive difficulties. But also, I think the plus side of that, the positive side, is that just because you find one area of maths really difficult, it doesn't mean that you're going to find all parts of maths difficult. And so one of the tasks for parents and teachers and families is to help children identify the bit of maths they can do and use that as a way in. So it might be things like the spatial reasoning or the geometry, or maybe a child might find numbers and arithmetic really, but they have a brilliant kind of problem-solving mind, and so maybe there's a kind of problem-solving skills that they can bring, or maybe they're really good at spotting patterns, and it's about helping children to find the bits of maths that they can do and that they can enjoy, and use that as a way in to help them and support them with the bits they find more difficult. So hopefully that's kind of like a more positive way of not just focusing on the difficulties, but also thinking about strengths, because everyone has got them. You've just got to find what they are.
Yeah, absolutely. I really like that you've put a positive spin on that. And I know Kat at the Dyscalculia Network will also relate to that as well, because she tries to work with finding what things that people really enjoy and do well. So that's really great to see that as well in the research side. And so my last question today is about sort of future directions with research. Like, what gaps in knowledge do you think there are? Or what would you recommend maybe future researchers look into studying?
Yeah, so I think a really important one is what dyscalculia looks like and how we can support dyscalculia as children go through education. So an awful lot of it is focused on sort of number processing, arithmetic, and those basic skills. And that's, a really, really important thing to understand, because if we don't understand that, then we can't support later on. But actually, it's also thinking about, well, what does dyscalculia look like in secondary school? What about algebra? What about trigonometry? What about some of these higher level maths topics that I don't think we're looking at all really in terms of maths difficulties and dyscalculia? So it's about understanding how dyscalculia might present differently as you go through education, and might need different kinds of support as you go through education and you get to those higher level bits of maths, because it's just as important to have that support in place there. So, and I don't think that there's hardly any research on that at the moment, so I think it's a really important question.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you spending your time with us today, Camilla. It seems you've got a lot of really interesting studies going on, and I look forward to hearing about them in the future. So yeah, thank you so much for being here today.
That's a pleasure. Thanks very much.
You're welcome. So thank you to everyone who listened today. My name was Jess, and that was Camilla Gilmore on the Dyscalculia Network's Dyscalculia Research Revealed and interview series. Bye.